I've been a firefighter for 32 years, and I can tell you this much. Fire isn't what scares me most. Fire is loud about its intentions. It snaps and roars and throws sparks in your face. It gives you warnings, seconds, maybe minutes if you're lucky and trained. You can see it getting worse. You can feel it on your ears and neck and hands. Cold water doesn't do any of that. Cold water just waits. It looks solid, dark, quiet. Then one bad step, one bad decision, and it turns your blood to slush, locks up your muscles, and shuts your heart down in 10 minutes or less. It doesn't care how brave you are. It doesn't negotiate. And on the night of January 17th, 1992, I learned that in the worst possible classroom, standing on the frozen shore of Lake Thornton, listening to children screaming while 12 ice shanties, 4 pickup trucks, and 23 people disappeared into a black hole that had been solid ground seconds before. Back then I was Captain Sam Carter at Station 47. Small town, small department, big winters. It was a Friday night about 7:30. Outside, the thermometer said 6 degrees. The kind of cold that makes your nostrils stick together when you breathe in, that turns the whole town into a postcard. White roofs, icicles hanging from the eaves, thin chimney smoke rising straight up into a black sky full of stars. Inside the station, the lights hummed, and the coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but it was warm. I was at the kitchen table with Charlie Donovan and Mike Peterson, playing cards on a scarred clipboard. The scanner had been quiet all evening. No accidents, no structure fires, no medical calls for us. Just the occasional patrol car checking in, and Linda Morrison's voice answering from dispatch, steady and bored. The kind of night where sensible people stayed home. But it was the third weekend in January, and around here that meant the Lake Thornton Ice Fishing Festival. Every year, folks from all over the county drove their trucks out onto the frozen lake, set up little wooden shacks barely big enough for 2 people, and a propane heater, drilled holes in the ice, and settled in for the weekend. Walleye, perch, beer, cards, and the same stories they'd told 100 times before. Their fathers had done it. Their grandfathers had done it. Tradition has its own gravity. It pulls people out of warm houses and onto frozen water, even when the thermometer says they should know better. Lake Thornton sits about 4 miles north of town. Maybe 200 acres if you count the marshy edges. In a normal winter, it freezes deep and solid by mid-January. You can see truck tracks running all over it, like someone dragged gray chalk lines across a white floor. That winter hadn't been normal. Earlier in the month, we'd had 3 days of unseasonable warmth. Rain on top of snow, slush everywhere, ice thinning from underneath. Then the temperature crashed again, and the surface refroze. From shore, the lake looked perfect, smooth, white, solid. Near the boat launch, the festival volunteers drilled and measured 12 inches of ice. They wrote "safe" in their notes and headed back to their trucks. Nobody walked out 60 yards and checked again. The call came in at 7:43 p.m. The phone rang on the wall at the same time the radio cracked alive. I'd know Linda's voice anywhere. That night, I knew something was wrong before I understood the words. Station 47. We've got multiple reports of ice collapse at Lake Thornton, she said. Linda had been working dispatch 15 years by then. I'd heard her walk drunk drivers through chest compressions and keep suicidal jumpers talking until we got there. She didn't scare easy. That night, Her voice had a tightness I'd never heard before. People in the water. Multiple vehicles through the ice. Sheriff's on scene. This is bad, Sam. Real bad. My chair scraped backward and toppled. Coffee sloshed across the duty roster. Charlie was already half out of his seat. Mike froze for one heartbeat, then moved when I yelled. Full cold water gear, I barked, heading for the bay. Dry suits, ropes, throw bags, rescue sled, everything that floats. Get the Zodiac on the trailer. Our cold water cache was nothing fancy. One 12-foot inflatable Zodiac with a small outboard that liked warm days better than nights like this. 2 old neoprene dry suits that smelled like mildew and didn't always stay dry. A couple of throw bags with floating rope. Life vests. Training we mostly did in April when falling in meant a miserable afternoon, not death. But it was what we had. We rolled out at 7:46. Engine 47 pulled the boat trailer behind us, lights slicing the dark with red and white flashes. I drove. Mike sat on the passenger seat, wrestling himself into his dry suit. Charlie was in the back, checking knots and clips by feel. I grabbed the radio mic to the cord tied across my chest. Dispatch, Engine 47 responding to Lake Thornton. I said, call mutual aid from Crawford County. I want every rescue swimmer they can spare. Ice suits, sleds, warming equipment, everything. How many people are we talking? Festival organizers say 40 to 50 on the ice when it went. Linda answered. Papers shuffled on her end, other phones ringing. Some made it off on their own. We've got at least a couple of dozen still in the water or unaccounted for. It's chaos up there. Sheriff's trying to get a count. 40 to 50 people. I did the calculation almost without thinking, because after enough years you can't not. Air at 6 degrees. Water under broken ice right around 32. For a reasonably healthy adult in water, that cold you get maybe 1 to 3 minutes of cold shock. Gasping, hyperventilating, heart doing strange tricks. About 10 minutes of useful muscle movement before you can't pull yourself out. 10 to 15 minutes before you start to black out. After that, your heart stops when it's ready, and not a second later. Kids and older folks have less time. We were 4 miles away. On dry summer roads, that's 5 minutes. On half-plowed January roads, more like 10 unless you push your luck. I pushed it. The county road twisted through woods and farmland. 2 narrow frozen lanes with ditches waiting on both sides. The engine's tires hummed and occasionally slid. The boat trailer fishtailed just enough to raise my blood pressure without putting us in a field. Nobody in the cab talked. The siren wailed. The heater rattled. In my head, I saw a black hole opening in white ice, and a lot of people falling in. We saw the glow before we saw the water. Red and blue strobes flickered between tree trunks. Headlights swept back and forth. And there was that other color, orange, flickering and wrong in the middle of a frozen lake. When the trees broke, the scene hit like a punch. The public boat launch looked like a parking lot after a stampede. Sheriff's cruisers nosed in at odd angles. Pickup trucks, half in the plowed area, half on snowbanks. People moved in clumps and clutches, some standing, some on the ground, some just staring. Beyond them, Lake Thornton had a bite taken out of it. A jagged black slash tore across the white ice about 60 yards from shore, running diagonal. The hole itself was 30, 40 feet wide in places. Broken plates of ice bobbed and ground against each other, their edges shining under the flashing lights. Between them, the water was pure ink. One ice shanty burned near the collapse. It had gone over when the ice dropped, the heater inside probably tipping into whatever flammable mess people had stacked around it. Now the little shack was a crooked box of fire. Flames licking into the bitter air, reflections turning the broken ice around it, orange and gold. Screams and shouts carried across the lake. Names, curses, prayers. Over everything else, I heard a woman's voice near the ambulances, raw and high, screaming the same two names over and over. Emily, Sarah. I pulled the engine up onto the plowed gravel and killed the siren. Jack's down. Chocks, leave it running, I said. Mike, tie off our main line to that pine. Charlie, help me get this boat to the water. Sheriff Tom Brennan met me halfway between the engine and the ice. His hat was crooked. His breath came in hard white clouds. Sam, he said, whole northwest section just dropped. Shanties, trucks, people. A chunk just disappeared. He sliced a hand through the air. I've got my guys trying to reach folks with ropes, but the ice keeps breaking under them. How many still out there? I asked, hauling the Zodiac off the trailer with Charlie. At least 15 we can see in the water, he said. More might be under. Some made it to thicker ice on the far side, but they're trapped out. There, and there's a blue Ford. He jerked his chin toward the dark. Nose down, cab half full. I saw someone moving inside a few minutes ago. Don't know about now. I followed his look. The F-150 sat at a crazy angle, front end submerged, tailgate barely on this side of the water. Its headlights glowed dimly under the surface, beams bending and flickering. The cab was a dark box. Now and then something moved against the glass. And kids, Tom added, voice dropping. The Hendersons 3. They brought them out. Bill and Martha made it in. The kids were outside the shack when it went. Last we saw, they were on a floe. Out there. He pointed with 2 fingers toward the open water. My eyes followed. At first I saw nothing but jumbled ice and dark gaps. Then the light hit just right, and I saw them, 3 small silhouettes on a chunk of ice, spinning slowly in the black. Behind Tom, near an ambulance, a woman wrapped in a metallic blanket clung to a taller shape that had to be her husband. Her dark hair was frozen into stiff ropes, face raw and red. Bill Henderson stood stiff beside her, staring at the lake like he could will it to give his kids back. I'll get them, I heard myself say. That might have been a promise. It might have been a prayer. First, I need your people off the ice. If it's breaking under them, they're one mistake from going in themselves. He grabbed his radio and started barking orders, pulling deputies back to shore. I turned to my guys. We're not walking out there, I said. We're going in by water. Dry suits, helmets, PFDS, lifeline from the bow ring to that big pine. Mike, you're our anchor. If I yell pull, you pull. He nodded, eyes too wide, but steady. We wrestled into the dry suits, tugged helmets on, tightened vests. The neoprene was stiff with cold. My fingers stung as I worked the zippers. Somewhere out over the water, a child screamed, "Daddy!" so sharply it felt like it cut straight through my gear. We dragged the Zodiac across snow and broken shoreline ice until its rubber nose hit open water. The transition from solid to liquid was a mess of slush and jagged chunks. "Clip me in," I told Mike. He snapped the carabiner from the rope onto the D-ring of my harness. "Keep it taut, but not tight," I said. "If it goes slack when it shouldn't, figure out why. If I yell, you don't argue. You pull till your arms come off." "Yes, Captain." Charlie and I shoved off, climbing into the boat as it floated. It rocked, settled, then steadied. I grabbed the starter cord. The first pull got nothing. The second got a cough. The third brought the motor sputtering to life. First we hit that three-man flow, I said, nodding to a cluster of heads clinging to a big slab 15 yards out. Then the truck. Kids after that. Charlie glanced out at the children's flow, then back at me. He didn't like the order, but he understood triage. The kids were still out of the water. The men we saw here were not. "Let's go," he said. We picked our way through broken ice. Chunks the size of tabletops bumped the hull. Smaller shards scraped along the rubber sides. The three men clinging to the floe watched us come like they weren't sure we were real. They were in their 40s or 50s, all of them wearing soaked, insulated coveralls and heavy boots that now did nothing but drag them down. Their hands were clamped to the ice so hard their knuckles had gone white. One had his face half submerged, lips blue, eyes half closed. "Hang on, we've got you," I called. Charlie grabbed the nearest man's collar and hauled him in. The guy collapsed in a heap, his whole body shaking so violently it looked like convulsions. Hypothermia had already moved past shivering into deep muscle tremors. The second man came in next, babbling something that might have been a prayer. The third didn't move at all. He floated with his arms draped over the edge of the ice, head tilted back, mouth open. His eyes stared up at the sky, dusted with frost. Charlie got a grip on his jacket and rolled him into the boat. His head lolled. His skin was the wrong kind of pale. I pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. Nothing. "Start compressions," I said. Charlie didn't argue. He dropped to his knees and started pumping, arms locking and unlocking in a steady rhythm, steam puffing from his mouth with his counts. I swung us back, toward shore, pushing the motor harder. We slid up onto the ice shelf and hands reached for us. "2 conscious, 1 pulseless," I shouted. "Severe hypothermia, CPR in progress." A young deputy, barely older than a rookie, took over compressions without hesitation. A paramedic dropped beside him with a mask. The 2 conscious men were bundled in blankets and hustled toward the ambulances. The pulseless one rode an ongoing wave of chest compressions toward whatever waited for him. We shoved the boat back into the water. I glanced toward the children's floe. It had drifted farther, spinning slowly, bumping other chunks. Their voices still carried. "Truck," I said. The F-150 rode lower now. Only a strip of windshield and roof showed above the surface. The rest of the cab was underwater or close. "Hold us steady," I told Charlie as we glided in. I killed the motor and let momentum do the last work. Up close, I could see the man inside clearly. Mid-50s, gray beard, plaid shirt, jacket open. The water inside the cab was up to his chest. His breath fogged a small patch on the glass with each shallow exhale. His movements were slow and clumsy. His brain was already fogging from cold and lack of air. I clipped my harness to the boat's ring, took a breath, and slid over the side into the lake. The first bite of water made my lungs spasm. Even with the suit, the cold was a full-body punch. Every nerve shouted. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. For a second, my body wanted to suck in a huge breath right when my face hit the water. I forced it down, slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't give the cold the reaction it wants. I grabbed the door frame and pulled myself toward the opening. The driver's door hung half ajar, bent when the truck went in. It took a hard shove from my shoulder to force it wider. "Sir," I shouted, voice dull in the drowned quiet. "Fire department, I've got you." His eyes rolled toward me without real recognition. His seatbelt was still buckled. My hands were numb and clumsy in the gloves. The buckle felt like frozen stone under my fingers. I fumbled once, twice. The truck dipped another inch. Water rushed around my arms. "Cap, we've got to move," Charlie shouted from above. The buckle finally released with a dull click. I hooked my hands under the man's armpits and pulled. He was dead weight. Every pound of him felt like two. My shoulders screamed. The truck groaned and sank another few inches. "Charlie, grab him," I barked. He leaned out over the side of the boat, got hold of the man's coat, and together we dragged him out of the seat and into the Zodiac. He landed on the floor with a wet thud. His chest rose and fell in shallow, jerky breaths. The skin around his mouth was gray. "Hang on, buddy," I muttered. I hauled myself back into the boat, muscles protesting. I reached for the starter cord, and that's when I heard the kids again. You'd think everything would blend together in a scene like that. Sirens, shouting, the crackle of burning wood, the whine of the motor, noise on top of noise. But their voices cut straight through all of it. "Mommy? Daddy?" High and thin and getting hoarse with effort. I turned and saw them properly. The floe they were on was maybe 10 feet across, uneven and slanted. It rotated slowly in the water, bumping smaller slabs. The three kids stood bunched together on the highest part, arms wrapped so tight around each other they looked like one shape with three heads. Two red coats, twins, one smaller blue coat between them. Faces pale, eyes huge, mouths open. "Cap," Charlie said quietly, eyes on the overloaded floor of the boat. "Boat's rated for 4. We've got 3 adults already. We take 3 more, and we're asking to flip this thing." He was right. The Zodiac rode low, rubber sides barely a few inches above the water. One hard bump, or someone panicking and standing up at the wrong time, and we could take on water. Training says, don't overload your rescue platform. Don't become a victim yourself. Training also says kids in immediate danger are high priority. Those 3 were out there, drifting away, standing on a chunk of ice that could flip or break at any time. If we ran the man from the truck back to shore first, offloaded, and came back, we'd lose at least 5 to 7 minutes. In that water, 7 minutes is a lifetime. I took a breath and chose the risk I could live with. "We're getting the kids," I said. "Now." Charlie swore under his breath, but he didn't argue. He shifted his weight to help keep us balanced. I started the motor and eased us toward the floe, heart pounding. As we got close, the kids' cries shifted. They weren't just screaming now. They were calling to us. "Over here, please. Are you the fireman?" The floe tilted slightly when our bow touched it. Water sloshed up over one edge. "Hey, hey," I called, keeping my voice calm. "You're doing great. We're here now. We're going to bring the boat right up, and then I'm going to lift you in one at a time. You just have to stay still. Can you do that for me?" One twin nodded so hard her hood flopped. The other just stared, eyes glassy, lips blue, breathing like a bird trapped in a box. "Is my mommy here?" she asked. "She's right there on shore," I said, pointing. In truth, I could only see shapes, but she didn't need detail. She needed hope. "She's safe, and she's waiting for you. We're going to take you to her." The nearest twin held out her arms. Her gloves were soaked, fingers stiff. "Okay, big step," I said. 1, 2, 3. She stepped, slipped a little, and I caught her under the arms, lifting her into the boat. She weighed almost nothing. As soon as her feet hit the floor, she folded into herself. Her sister followed. The moment she was in, she crawled to her twin and wrapped herself around her like she could hold her together by force. Then the boy, smaller, coat too big, cheeks blotchy red and white, teeth chattering so hard I could hear it. "Your turn, buddy," I said. "Same deal. Big step." He tried. His foot hit the edge of the flow wrong, and for a second he was nowhere. One boot on ice, one on rubber, arms windmilling over black water. His scream went straight through me. I grabbed the back of his coat and yanked. The flow lurched. A sheet of water washed over the edge into the boat. For one horrible heartbeat, the Zodiac tilted too far to one side. "Easy," Charlie grunted, throwing his weight the other way. The boat settled. The boy landed in a tangle at my feet, then scrambled toward his sisters, wedging himself between them. Now we were truly overloaded. 2 firefighters, 3 kids, 1 unconscious man in a boat meant for 4. The sides rode so low, any decent wave could have come right over. "Okay," I said. "Nobody moves unless I tell you to. Sit down. Stay low. Hold on to each other." The girls nodded, clutching their brother. The man on the floor stayed still, for better or worse. I eased the motor into gear and pointed us at shore, moving slower than my nerves wanted, threading us between the bigger chunks of ice, keeping the boat as steady as I could. Every bump felt like a threat. Every little slosh sounded like the start of a wave. "Are we going to sink?" the boy asked, voice small. "Not on my watch," I said. It wasn't bravado. It was sheer stubbornness. We slid up onto the ice shelf more gently this time, letting the hull ride up and stick. "Hands!" I shouted. They were ready. Deputies, medics, even a couple of soaked festival-goers who hadn't yet realized how cold they were, formed a line of reaching arms. "Let me pass them to you," I said. "One at a time, easy." I lifted the first twin, then the second, then the boy, passing them out of the boat and into a forest of blankets and gloved hands. Thermal wraps went around them almost before their boots left the deck. Their parents hit them a second later. Martha let out a sound I don't have a word for when she saw them. Relief and grief and something animal, all wrapped together. She grabbed both girls at once, sobbing into their wet hair. Bill scooped up Jack and then pulled the whole family into one shaking knot. For a heartbeat, in the middle of the chaos, that little huddle was the only thing that mattered. Then they were hustled toward an ambulance and my world shrank back down to the boat, the rope, the black water, and the people still out there. The man from the truck was next. He was still breathing, barely, skin waxy, cold as the ice. "Unconscious male," I called as we slid him out. "Pulled from submerged vehicle, unknown submersion time, shallow respirations, full rewarming." Medics took over. Bag mask over his face, warm fluids hanging, monitors slapped on. The ambulance, doors shut on them and their fluorescent cocoon. I turned back to the lake. "How many left?" I asked Tom. He looked at his scribbled notes. "We've pulled 18 alive so far," he said. "Festival guy says 43 people on the ice when it collapsed. Some were never out there. Some made it straight to shore. Some we might have missed in the count. Numbers keep shifting. We're still short." "We go until Crawford gets here," I said. "Then we go a bit more." So we did. We made 3 more runs before the mutual aid units took over. We pulled an older woman clinging to an overturned cooler, hair frozen into white spikes, lips a thin blue line, apologizing for being a bother. We hauled in a teenager and his dog. the kid half submerged and insisting we grab the dog first, the dog biting my glove hard enough to bruise when I reached for his collar. We dragged out a 75-year-old who decided he could just walk in and kept falling through chest-deep water because the ice in front of him broke every time he tried to climb. By the time Crawford County's tech rescue team arrived with rigid sleds, proper immersion suits, long-reach poles, and more people, my arms felt like they belonged to someone else. My hands were blocks of wood. My face burned where the suit had leaked at the neck. Their team moved like they'd drilled this exact scenario for years. Ladders laid flat on the ice. Rescuers clipped to lines. Sleds pushed ahead of them as they crawled. They fanned out in coordinated patterns, replaced our battered Zodiac with better tools, and for the first time that night, I felt like we weren't only barely keeping up. We shifted to shore, warming, triage, loading ambulances. The boat launch had turned into a makeshift field hospital. People stood or sat wrapped in blankets, steam rising from soaked clothes. Medics knelt in the snow beside patients, gloved hands on necks and wrists, counting out lives in beats per minute. The young deputy who'd taken over CPR on that first unresponsive man worked until someone physically pulled him off to rotate. The man never woke up. He was pronounced in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Divers found the second victim under the ice near one of the trucks. Her name was Margaret Schultz. I hadn't known her name at first, but I'd seen her. When we rolled up, before I got into my suit, I'd noticed a woman on the edge of the crowd. Mid-40s, dark hair and a ponytail, purple parka that stood out among all the camouflage and brown jackets. She had an arm around a teenage boy's shoulders. He'd rolled his eyes at something she said, but he leaned into her anyway. A mom and her kid at a winter festival. Later, while the divers were still working, I saw that same purple parka draped over a folding chair near an ambulance. It was empty. 2 teenagers stood next to it now. The boy from earlier, hair dripping, face white, and a girl, a little younger, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold in pieces. Their father paced a trampled patch of snow, hat in his hands, eyes locked on the water. Tom came to stand next to me. "That's the Schultzes," he said quietly. "Margaret's truck went in. Never saw her come out." There wasn't any "did we" question worth finishing. By the time divers get to a vehicle under ice with no air pocket left, you're in recovery, not rescue. They brought her up anyway, careful and deliberate, because that's what you do for the living on shore. They laid her on a stretcher, covered her face, and carried her toward the ambulances that had taken the Henderson kids. I thought about walking over to her teenagers, saying something. We did everything we could. It was fast. She didn't suffer. Maybe some of that was true. None of it would bring their mother back. In the end, I stayed where I was and watched. I've replayed that choice more times than I can count. By about 9:15, Crawford's team had finished their sweeps. Everyone was accounted for. 23 people had gone into the water. 21 came out live. On paper, that's a miracle. Real life isn't paper. We cleared the scene a little after midnight. The fire in the shanty was out. The F-150 was completely gone beneath the surface, marked only by a buoy and some tape. The Henderson kids were on their way to County General, wrapped in warm blankets, parents still wrapped around them like armor. The road back to Station 47 felt twice as long as the drive out, even though I drove slower. Nobody talked in the cab. The engine's rumble and the occasional rattle from the trailer were the only sounds. Back at the station, we moved like old men. Dry suits peeled off with ugly sucking noises. Gear went on racks. Boots were left in little puddles of melted snow and lake water. The bay smelled like wet rubber, sweat, and faintly of fish. In the day room, Charlie dropped into the couch and didn't bother taking his boots off. Mike sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands like he wasn't sure they were attached. The scanner murmured quietly on the counter. The TV stayed dark. "Do we talk about it?" Mike asked eventually. "About what part?" Charlie said with his eyes closed. "The kids," Mike said. "The ones we got. The ones we didn't. The guy in the truck. The woman they pulled out. All of it." "Some nights you talk," I said. "Some nights you don't. Tonight my jaw's as tired as my arms." "Real helpful, Cap," Charlie muttered. My phone buzzed on the table. A news alert lit the little screen. "Tragedy at Lake Thornton, 21. Rescued after ice collapse." I turned it, face down. "They'll make it sound simpler than it was," I said. "They always do," Charlie answered. "That's their job. Ours is to show up when the ice goes." He wasn't wrong. The formal investigation later said what we all already knew. 3 days of warm weather had thinned the lake from below. The cold snap after that froze a hard skin over the top and fooled everyone. The festival organizers drilled near shore, found 12 inches, and declared it safe. No one checked 60 yards out where the shanties and trucks were clustered. Out there, the ice was 3 to 4 inches in spots. Enough for a careful person walking. Not enough for a pickup and a shack full of gear. There were recommendations. No more vehicles on the ice. Mandatory checks farther from shore before any future events. Better public education on cold water danger. The Lake Thornton Ice Fishing Festival was postponed the next year, and the year after that. Then it just disappeared from the calendar. The lake still freezes every winter. People still walk out with sleds and augers. But no one drives out there anymore. Not officially. There's a sign at the boat launch now that reads, "Danger. Ice thickness variable. No vehicles on ice." Big red letters. Rust stains running down from the bolts. Fading around the edges, but still readable. Every January 17th, someone leaves a wreath at the base of that sign. White flowers, blue ribbon that says, "In memory." I don't know who does it. I just know that whenever I drive by around that date, it's there. Sometimes when I'm heading up to Erie to see my son, I detour and pull into that lot. I sit in the cab, look at the Wrath, and look out at the ice. From the road it looks smooth and solid and beautiful in the winter sun. Up close I see cracks no one else sees. I retired from Station 47 in 2004. Got the plaque, the signed helmet, the sheet cake in the bay. My daughter took a picture of Engine 47 with the bay doors open and gave it to me in a frame. The tones went off during my thank you speech and half the room left to catch the rig. That felt about right. Lake Thornton didn't retire with me. I carry it into classrooms now. A couple of times a year, the department asks me to talk to new recruits about cold water rescue. I stand in the training room where I used to write duty assignments on a whiteboard and look at a row of young faces that still think worst call means biggest fire. We start with the textbook stuff. Survival times at different water temps, cold shock, the 1 to 10 to 1 rule, how to rig a tether, how to use a rescue sled without turning it into a projectile. Then I tell them about Lake Thornton. Not just the numbers. Not just 2 fatalities, 21 saves. I tell them about the smell of the burning shanty, the way my dry suit leaked at the neck, the sound of metal as the truck sank under me. I tell them about the moment I chose to overload a boat because 3 kids were screaming on a floe and I couldn't live with waiting. One year, a recruit raised his hand. "Cap," he asked, "would you make the same call on the boat now? Knowing everything you know?" I thought about giving him a safe answer. Instead, I said, "Yes. I'd like to tell you I'd be smarter, that I'd find a perfect option that saved everyone with no extra risk. But in that moment, with what I had, I made the choice I could live with. That's what you'll face out there. There's no zero risk in what we do. All you get to choose is which risk you're willing to own." He didn't look entirely comforted. That's probably a good thing. The Henderson kids grew up. I didn't follow their lives like a hobby. This is just a small town, and news travels. A week after the collapse, Bill and Martha came by the station with a basket of cookies and a card the girls had colored. The drawing on the front was a red rectangle that I think was meant to be our fire engine, and 3 stick figures waving from the top. The twins were shy at first, peeking out from behind their mom's legs. When I knelt down, one suddenly rushed forward and threw her arms around my neck. "You pulled me out," she said into my collar. "Both of you," I told her, voice not quite steady. Jack shook my hand like a little grown man, serious-eyed and solemn. "We just wanted to say thank you," Martha said. "I know you were just doing your job, but our kids—" Her voice broke. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "Eat the cookies for me. I'm not supposed to have that much sugar." They sent Christmas cards for years. Everyone had a photo. Kids in front of a tree, kids in Halloween costumes, kids at graduations. Inside, in Bill's neat block letters, it always said some version of, "We remember, thank you." Those cards sit in a box in my closet. I don't take them out often, but I know they're there. Last I heard, Emily became a pediatric nurse. Sarah teaches elementary school. Jack joined the Army, did his time overseas, and came home safe. I ran into him at the grocery store once in uniform. He stuck his hand out the same way he had as a kid. "Hey, Cap," he said, "still staying off the ice?" "I figure I've tested my luck enough," I told him. We both laughed, but there was weight under it we didn't have to talk about. I don't go out on frozen lakes anymore. Charlie does. He sends me pictures of himself on Lake Thornton with his grandkids, bundled up, holding strings of fish. The ice under their boots looks thick and blue and safe. I'm genuinely happy for them. Me, I'll watch from shore. Every time I see a wide, flat sheet of ice, my brain lays that night over it like tracing paper. I hear cracks and screams where other people hear silence. I feel the cold in my joints before I even step out of the truck. On damp winter nights, that cold comes back and lives in my bones. My hands ache where rope burned them. My shoulder twinges where I heaved that man out of the cab. Sometimes I wake from a dead sleep, sure I'm still in that overloaded boat, trying to make it back without tipping. I lie there in my warm, quiet bedroom, listen to my wife breathing beside me, and remind myself they made it. Not all of them. 2 didn't, but 21 people went home who might not have. 3 kids grew up, sent cards, built lives. You carry both truths, the saves and the losses, the ghosts and the living faces. People outside the job like to talk about heroes. They want names and headlines and clean stories. When they ask me about my worst call, they expect a 5-alarm fire or a highway pileup. I tell them about Lake Thornton instead, not because it had the biggest flames, but because it had the coldest water and the clearest reminder of what this work really is. It wasn't a night of heroics. It was a night of showing up, of doing the next right thing. Clip in, shove off, pull, lift, repeat, until there's no one left to pull. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. But when young firefighters ask me why we do it, why we run toward black water and broken ice when everyone else backs away, I think of three small figures on a rotating slab of ice, calling for their parents. And I tell them this: you won't always get to win. You won't always save everyone. But you show up anyway. You take your training and your fear and your cold hands, and you put them in that boat, and you go. Because on some nights, that decision is the only thing standing between 23 bodies under the ice and 21 people going home. For me, that has to be enough. Most nights, it is.